November 2025 was a very important day for elections in the United States. Many people, including political experts, watched these elections closely. They saw them as a big test for the country. These elections happened about 1 year after President Donald Trump started his second term in office. During this time, the nation was dealing with many big problems. People were worried about their money and the cost of living. There was also much disagreement and fighting between different political groups across the country. These elections are known as off-year elections. They take place in years when Americans do not vote for a new president or for all members of Congress. Because of this, sometimes fewer people pay attention to them compared to presidential elections. However, these off-year elections are still very important. They work like a temperature check for the country. They show how voters truly feel about the current president, Donald Trump, and his government. The results give clear signals about the national mood and what citizens are thinking. In 2025, the off-year elections were especially important because of the serious issues the country faced. The economy was a main concern for many families. Prices for everyday items, like food and fuel, seemed to be going up. People were also worried about their jobs and how secure their future was. Beyond money problems, there was a lot of political division. Different groups of people had very strong, opposing ideas on how the country should be run. This made it hard for people to agree. These elections allowed voters to send a clear message about these big issues. They gave an early look at what might happen in the bigger elections in the coming years, shaping the future of American politics. 2. Why these elections are important. Off-year elections are special elections in the United States. They take place in odd-numbered years, such as 2025. These are years when there is no national election for president or for all members of Congress. In off-year elections, people often vote for governors of states, mayors of cities, and members of their state legislatures. Voters might also decide on local issues or fill empty seats in Congress. Even though these elections get less attention, they are very important. They help us understand how the country is feeling about its leaders and the government. A key thing about off-year elections is that fewer people vote. In a presidential election, about 60% of eligible people vote. For midterm elections, about 40% vote. But in off-year elections, the number of voters is usually much lower. This low turnout can change the results. When fewer people vote, groups with strong beliefs or specific interests can have a bigger effect. These highly motivated voters can make a big difference in who wins. The way politicians talk to voters can also change because they are trying to reach a smaller, often more dedicated group of people. These elections serve as a test for the sitting president. They give a clear idea of how popular the president and his party are. It is common for the party that is not in the White House to do well in off-year elections. For example, the 2025 elections took place about 1 year after President Donald Trump began his second term. These elections were seen as an important check on his government. These elections helped show what voters thought about his policies and the direction of the country, setting the stage for bigger elections to come. Certain states hold their important governor elections in these off years. New Jersey and Virginia are two examples. Their governor races happen in the odd year right after a president is chosen. This makes them critical for showing national mood. Historically, in Virginia, the party that is against the sitting president has won the governor's race in 11 of the last 12 elections since 1977. This trend highlights how these state-level races become a direct way for voters to express their satisfaction or unhappiness with the president in power. Their outcomes give hints about future election results. 3. The big races to watch. Before Election Day, many important races were happening across the country. These elections would show what voters thought about the country's direction. People watched these races closely. In New Jersey, there was a big race for governor. Mikey Sherrill, a Democrat and a former Navy pilot, was running. She was a U.S. representative. Her opponent was Jack Chiateri, a Republican and former state assemblyman. President Donald Trump supported Jack Chiateri. New Jersey usually votes Democratic for president. But in 2024, President Trump did better there than before. Republicans hoped to win this race. They wanted to show that President Trump's support could help other candidates, even in states that often vote Democratic. Another key race for governor was in Virginia. Abigail Spanberger, a former CIA officer and U.S. representative, was the Democratic candidate. She was running against Winsome Earl Sears, the Republican lieutenant governor. Virginia's governor races often go to the party that does not have the president in the White House. This makes the race a test of how people feel about the current president. In Virginia, President Trump's approval rating was not high. More people disapproved than approved. Virginia had become more Democratic in recent years. The mayor's race in New York City was also very exciting and caused a lot of debate. In the Democratic primary election, Zohran Mamdani won a surprise victory. He is a young state assemblyman and a Democratic socialist. He beat former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Mamdani's ideas were very progressive. President Trump called him a communist. President Trump also said he might cut federal money for the city if Mamdani won. Mamdani's campaign talked a lot about housing costs and how expensive life was for people in the city. His campaign showed younger, progressive voters were becoming more active. In California, voters had to decide on a special issue called Proposition 50. This vote was about changing California's voting maps for the U.S. House of Representatives. If approved, the state could redraw districts in the middle of the decade. This could create up to 5 more Democratic seats in Congress. This idea came after Republicans in Texas changed their maps to help their party. California's plan aimed to balance that. These new maps would be used for elections starting in 2026. These big races were important tests. They would show the mood of the country and set the stage for future elections. 4. The results are in. On November 4, 2025, election night brought clear results across the country. It was a big night for Democratic candidates in many important races. The results showed a shift in political feeling since President Trump's win in 2024, indicating new political momentum. In New Jersey, Democrat Mikey Sherrill defeated Republican Jack Ciattarelli. This was a decisive victory for Sherrill. Her win was very important for Democrats, especially because Ciattarelli had received President Trump's direct support. Sherrill will make history as New Jersey's 57th governor and its second female governor. She is set to begin her term on January 20, 2026. In Virginia, Democrat Abigail Spanberger also won the governor's race, becoming Virginia's first female governor. Spanberger focused her campaign on addressing economic concerns and openly criticized President Trump. Voters in Virginia chose Democratic leadership, following a historical trend where the party not holding the White House often wins the state's governor's seat. New York City celebrated a truly historic win. Zohran Mamdani, a 34-year-old Democratic Socialist state assemblyman, won the mayoral election. This made him the city's first Muslim mayor and its youngest mayor in over 100 years. His victory was notable, especially after he beat former Governor Andrew Cuomo in the primary election. Mamdani's campaign focused on making life more affordable for New Yorkers. He proposed ideas like freezing rent for many residents, introducing a progressive tax on wealthy individuals, and providing universal child care and free city buses. This election saw a high turnout, with over 2 million New Yorkers voting, the highest number for a mayoral race since 1969. California voters made another key decision by approving Proposition 50. This ballot measure allows the state to redraw its congressional districts. This change could potentially create up to 5 additional Democratic seats in the House of Representatives for future elections, starting in 2026. The measure received about 57% of the votes. This outcome is significant because it means Democrats in California are now using redistricting, just as Republicans in states like Texas have done, to try and gain a political advantage. This shows how both major parties are now actively shaping voting maps for their benefit. In other major cities, the election results were more varied. In Seattle, incumbent Mayor Bruce Harrell secured his re-election, winning against progressive challenger Katie Wilson. In Minneapolis, incumbent Mayor Jacob Frey successfully kept his position, surviving a challenge from State Senator Omar Fateh, who is also a Democratic Socialist. However, in Oakland, former U.S. Representative Barbara Lee, a respected progressive figure, maintained her position as mayor after winning a special election earlier in the year. These diverse outcomes in different cities highlighted the range of voter sentiments across the nation. 5. What the results mean for Trump. The election results on November 4, 2025, offered important lessons for President Donald Trump and his political party. These off-year races were seen as a key test of how people felt about the country, especially 1 year into President Trump's second term. One very clear message was that President Trump's personal support did not automatically help other Republican candidates win. He had actively campaigned for Republican candidates in key states like New Jersey and Virginia. For instance, he openly endorsed Jack Ciattarelli in New Jersey's governor race. Yet, in both New Jersey and Virginia, Democrats won the governor's office. This showed that even in states where President Trump had performed well in the 2024 election, voters chose Democratic leaders this time. It seemed that people who voted for President Trump himself might not always vote for other Republicans he supported. His strong popularity did not easily transfer to other candidates on the ballot. This outcome made many political experts think about President Trump's lasting political power. It appeared that his influence was strongest when he was the one asking for votes. When his name was not directly on the ballot, Republican candidates struggled more to win, even with his backing. This raised questions about whether the Republican Party could keep winning big elections if President Trump was not the main candidate in every race. Another major finding was how worried voters were about the economy. Throughout the election campaigns, many people talked about the high cost of living. They were concerned about how much they paid for homes, health care, energy, and even child care. Both Republican and Democratic candidates tried to address these money issues. Some Democratic candidates specifically said that President Trump's economic policies, like his plans for tariffs, could make prices go up even more for everyday goods. However, polls also showed that many voters were not fully convinced that Democrats had all the answers either. This highlighted a general worry among people who wanted solutions but were unsure which party truly offered them. President Trump's approval rating at the time was quite low. Around 37 to 41% of people approved of his job as president, while a larger number, 63%, did not. This low approval rating likely made it harder for Republican candidates who were tied to his administration to win their elections. However, some Republicans quickly argued that these results were just for off-year elections. They said that in the bigger 2026 midterm elections, President Trump's most loyal supporters would still come out to vote for Republicans. In summary, the 2025 elections showed President Trump that his personal popularity had limits when it came to other races. Voters were very vocal about their economic concerns, and the results offered a mixed picture for the Republican Party's path forward. 6. A divided Democratic Party. The election results showed that the Democratic Party has different ideas inside it. There are often disagreements between different groups within the party. These elections highlighted how strong these different views are becoming. The party is seeing a clear split, especially between those who want big changes and those who prefer smaller, more careful steps. One big event that showed this was the mayoral election in New York City. A new mayor, Zoran Mamdani, won. He is a democratic socialist. This means he believes the government should do more to help people, for example, with housing and living costs. His win was a big surprise because he beat a very famous former governor, Andrew Cuomo, in the primary election. Mamdani's campaign promised to freeze rent for many people, tax rich New Yorkers more, and offer free city buses. He received support from important progressive leaders like Senator Bernie Sanders. However, Mamdani's victory also caused worry for some. President Donald Trump called Mamdani a communist and threatened to cut federal money to New York City. Some Democrats and Jewish leaders were also concerned about his strong opinions on certain issues. This shows the split inside the Democratic Party between progressives who want fast, big changes and moderates who want more careful, slower changes. In other cities, like Seattle and Minneapolis, voters chose to keep their current, more moderate mayors, even though progressive candidates also ran. Another new strategy for Democrats appeared in California. Voters there approved Proposition 50. This change allows the state to redraw voting maps again, even though it's not a normal time for it. This move could help Democrats win as many as 5 more seats in the House of Representatives. Governor Gavin Newsom and other Democrats supported this. They said it was a way to fight against Republicans in other states who were also changing maps to help their own party. This shows Democrats are now using similar tactics as Republicans to gain an advantage in elections. These results showed that the Democratic Party is not one single group with one idea. It has different views and different plans for the future. The tensions between its progressive and moderate parts are growing. This will be important for how the party works in future elections. 7. Looking to the future. The November 2025 elections gave us much to think about regarding American democracy. These votes showed both the power of people's voices and some big challenges ahead. One significant problem these elections highlighted is partisan gerrymandering. This happens when political parties draw voting maps in a way that helps their own side win more seats. For example, in California, voters approved a plan to redraw congressional districts. This was done to help Democrats gain an advantage, following similar actions by Republicans in states like Texas. This practice makes elections less fair because it focuses on changing voting boundaries instead of truly reflecting what voters want. When both major parties use this method, it makes it harder for real competition in elections. This raises serious questions about the fairness of our election system. These results also tell us important things for the next big elections, the 2026 midterm elections. Historically, the party of the sitting president often loses many seats in Congress during midterms. With President Donald Trump in the White House, his Republican Party might face this same trend. The wins for Democrats in states like New Jersey and Virginia show that many voters were not happy with the government's direction. These elections also showed that President Trump's personal popularity did not always help other Republican candidates win. This means the Republican Party needs to find new strategies to win elections in 2026, especially when President Trump is not directly on the ballot. For the future of both political parties, these elections raise big questions. The Democratic Party saw a very progressive candidate win the mayor's race in New York City. This showed a clear split between the party's moderate and more liberal groups. Can the Democrats unite these different ideas and people to win bigger elections across the country? For the Republican Party, the challenge is also clear. How can they win races if President Trump's strong support does not transfer to other candidates? For the future of both political parties, these elections raise big questions. The Democratic Party saw a very progressive candidate win the mayor's race in New York City. This showed a clear split between the party's moderate and more liberal groups. Can the Democrats unite these different ideas and people to win bigger elections across the country? For the Republican Party, the challenge is also clear. How can they win races if President Trump's strong support does not transfer to other candidates? His endorsements did not lead to wins in key governor races this time. Both parties must think deeply about what American voters truly want and how they will build their support for the future. American democracy faces important decisions about fair elections and the path forward for its main political groups. 8. A final thought. The 2025 off-year elections gave us important lessons. Voters sent a strong message about how they felt. Many people were worried about the economy and the cost of living. They used their votes to show their concerns. Democrats saw good results in some key races. They won the governor elections in New Jersey and Virginia. This showed that President Donald Trump's support did not always help other Republican candidates win. These wins gave Democrats hope for future elections. However, the Democratic Party also faced challenges. New York City elected Zohran Mamdani, a progressive candidate. His victory showed a division within the party between progressive ideas and more traditional ones. This split could make it harder for Democrats to work together. Also, in California, voters approved Proposition 50. This allowed Democrats to change voting maps to help their party. This was a clear sign of how both parties are using maps to gain power. Republicans also had lessons to learn. Their core voters remained active, but the results showed that President Trump's endorsements did not always lead to wins for his party. This meant Republicans needed to find new ways to motivate voters when President Trump was not personally on the ballot. They also continued to use new voting maps in other states, like Texas, to keep their power. These elections, though smaller than presidential elections, were very important. They acted like a test for the whole country. They showed what issues were most important to people, such as the economy and the direction of the government. Every election, no matter how small, tells us something about the mood of the nation. Voters always have a voice through their ballots. The 2025 elections are now in the past, but their impact will be seen in the future. They set the stage for the important 2026 midterm elections. Both the Democratic and Republican parties now have a clearer idea of what they need to do next. Democrats must find ways to unite their different groups and reach more voters. Republicans must expand their appeal beyond President Trump's strongest supporters. The main takeaway is clear. Every election is important. Even small ones shape the future. What do you think was the most surprising result from these 2025 off-year elections?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.